one among the 7,000 islands of the Philippine archipelago. On the remote southwestern coast lies the village of Canton. Life in the secluded hamlet appears idyllic, immune to the influences of the outside world. It was 1985 when the people of Canton first welcomed Franck Goddio. The winds that drove a 62-foot ketch across the South China Sea have changed many times in Franck Goddio's life. To some, he may have seemed an eccentric, a successful businessman whose twin passions for history and the sea combined in a career as an underwater archaeologist. Now he was leading his first attempt to search for the remains of an obscure English ship. That first mission ended in disappointment. The conditions were too rugged, the technology too primitive, the ocean itself simply too deep. Even if the wreck had not already been scattered by the wind and the currents, Goddio concluded that the royal captain would probably never be found. But he did not give up. It is 15 years later. Franck Goddio has returned to the South China Sea, this time aboard the Ocean Voyager, a 200-foot vessel specially rigged for deep-sea work. For 6 weeks, the ship is home for the 50 members of an international expedition. Goddio has also brought along a pair of 2-person micro-submersibles called deep rovers. Nicknamed Jules and Jim, the 5.5-ton vehicles are marvels of marine engineering. Today, pilot Muriel Zilvijan checks out the controls as the crew prepares for the first launch of the day. The subs are capable of operating at depths over 1,000 meters. Their unique 13-centimeter thick pressure hull provides a panoramic view. After the support diver unhooks the lift cables, the subs begin their free fall into the sea. Drifting in a crushing void, the romantic images of sunken treasure become vivid reality. But it's not dreams of plunder that have lured Franck Goddio here. The royal captain was no treasure galleon. She was a merchant ship carrying a cargo of tea, silk, and porcelain. Still, to an archaeologist like Goddio, her remains are nevertheless priceless. A shipwreck is a time capsule. Finding one unseals the portal to a distant horror. But to truly appreciate Franck Goddio's obsession with the royal captain, you must first listen to the story of her loss. It is a tale told by an eyewitness.
It was a fine, clear night, and we could not see the appearance of breakers or any kind of surf or swell on the water. At 2:30 a.m., the ship unfortunately struck on a shoal of rocks.
This is a logbook which has been saved from the royal captain before she sank. It's a very rare and important object. It describes precisely everything which has happened after she struck the reef. It has been written by James Quick, the first mate. Just after she struck, Captain Burrow went on the bridge and ordered sounding to be taken around the boat. On the port side, they found 16 feet of water. On the starboard side, they found no bottom with 100 fathom line. At 5:15 in the morning, the crew start his first attempt to free her from the reef. They drop a small anchor 50 yards off the starboard side and try to pull her off the reef. Unfortunately, the reef is very steep there, and the cable went down nearly vertical and was of no use. The logbook tells us how dramatic the situation was.
It was now almost daylight when a most dreadful shoal appeared in our view, and we began our second attempt to free the ship from the shoal. The cutter was sent out again to sound the depth. The stream anchor was rowed out and dropped on a rocky outcrop. We attached a 9-inch hawser and fed the cable through the stern cabin to the aft capstan. The second spring cable was tied off forward to prevent the ship from swinging around. Then the crew hauled on the heavy hawsers, but the stern cable was severed by rocks underwater, and our efforts failed.
The loss of the Royal Captain is more than the story of a single shipwreck. It was a symbolic turning point, a disaster that altered the fates of men and changed the destiny of nations. On the last day of the year, 1600, Queen Elizabeth I signed the Crown Charter establishing the Governor and Company of Merchants of London, trading into the East Indies. The Honorable East India Company, or the Company as it was simply known, was a trading monopoly with a royal pedigree. Late into the Elizabethan era, England was regarded by the dominant European powers, the Spanish, Dutch, and the Portuguese, as little more than a nation of pirates, barbarians snapping at the heels of their more civilized neighbors. The Company would change that balance of power forever. It would become the most potent economic force the world has ever seen before or since. At its peak, it controlled half the world's trade, a quarter of its land, and a third of its people. Company ships roamed the globe, carrying tea to England, woolens to Japan, spices to Europe and the Americas, and polo to India. In most respects, she was a typical ship of the line. 143 feet from bow to rudder, and 36 feet across her beam. The Royal Captain was virtually indistinguishable from a Royal Navy warship. Anchored into her massive oak hull, her three masts soared 150 feet above her upper deck. On an even keel, her gun ports were positioned 13 feet above the waterline. This height was crucial in calculating how far the ship could heel before taking on water. The Royal Captain carried 29-pound cannons and 6 4-pounders.
Officially, the Royal Captain was 499 tons. Well, that's how the India Company registered her. In fact, it was a fiction designed to get round the legislation which required that any vessel over 500 tons had to carry a chaplain. In fact, the Royal Captain came in at nearly 860 tons, almost the biggest merchant ship afloat at that date.
Even the Honorable Company was not above a little deceit if it saved them money. With no priest aboard to bless her departure, the Royal Captain sailed from Gravesend at the mouth of the Thames on a dismal morning, December 19th, 1772. It was the beginning of the end of her maiden voyage. At a depth of 55 meters, Jules navigates along an outcropping. Franck is the first to spot it. The Royal Captain's best bower, or main anchor. Embedded on the reef, the 11-foot forged iron hook is shrouded by 200 years of coral incrustation. The sub swings in for a closer look. The frayed cords of a 9-inch hawser are still visible.
By 10 a.m., the men managed to reattach the cable to the stream anchor, and we resumed hauling on the stern hawser. But again, we were disappointed. The cable broke, and the ship pivoted on her bow and swung around 90 degrees. She struck very hard. As the danger of capsizing increased, the captain had the starboard cannons tossed overboard. The breeze freshened from the northeast, and the men raced to set the sails. We veered for about 5 minutes, then ran aground again. As the tide turned, we began to despair of ever getting the ship off the shoal.
Further down the cliff, the subs make another discovery. The ship's starboard cannons. Jettisoned by the crew in a frantic effort to stop the ship from overturning. Their location is an important marker in plotting the royal captain's position during her final desperate moments. Diving to 175 meters, Franck's sub encounters one of the shoal's most majestic features, an enormous cave.
This is the entrance of the big
it's
cave
huge.
here. Yeah, it's 25 meter high by 30 meter wide. Look, you can't even see the end of the cave. Yeah. It's going down. Look, look. The bell.
The cavern is carpeted with wreckage from the ship. Some of the porcelain cargo, along with a number of iron bars that were used to ballast the ship.
Here you see porcelain. Another one here.
Yeah.
This is an intact plate. Look, here there is some iron bars.
Yeah.
And we are 15 meters inside the cave here. Another one there. Porcelain scattered all over.
It was now late afternoon. The royal captain has been dragging herself across solid rock for almost 12 hours. She has lost 5 anchors and all her heavy hawsers. Listing severely, water floods through her gun ports. She is mortally wounded. As Captain Barrow gives the order to abandon ship, a mutiny brews among a drunken crew.
There were a few brash, unthinking people who stubbornly refused to quit the ship and said they would be glad to stay with the wreck since they had nothing more to lose than their lives. They were finally persuaded of their folly, and the cutter was sent back to bring the remainder of the people away. But 3 resisted: David Gowans, William Alexander, and John Matthews, seamen who were so much intoxicated with liquor, they just could not get them away.
After exploring the cave, the subs continue their descent. At a depth of 300 meters, the ground glitters. A debris trail rises along a narrow promontory. Here, the grave of a ship that sank more than 2 centuries ago. The royal captain's shattered hull protrudes from a mound of sediment called a tumulus. The landscape resembles a war zone more than any recognizable construction. The evidence here not only confirms Goddio's theory of where the royal captain sank, but also how.
Now that we have discovered the remains of the Royal Captain, we know what has happened when she sank. First, she went down alongside the cliff, bumping this cliff. She entered a cave 175 meters deep, splitting iron bars and porcelain inside the cave. She broke into two parts. One part went down the slope, down to 1,000 meters. The other part continued its course and was stopped with a very big rock at 300 meters deep.
The Royal Captain's Shoal, a line of breakers rippling inconspicuously above the summit of the 3.5-mile-long Coral Mountain. The danger here is deceptive. It is a fatal reef, an uncharted graveyard for untold numbers of ships. Today, Franck directs his team as they conduct the first systematic mapping of the shoal. The survey operates out of Goddio's 70-foot ocean-going catamaran, Kaimiloa. The boat is a state-of-the-art hydrographic research lab. Navigating by a satellite-based differential GPS, the catamaran tows a subsurface magnetometer array that detects metallic hits or anomalies along the seabed. Side-scan sonar and echo sounders are used to profile the anomalies, creating a digital mosaic of the reef. In the final analysis, all the information collected by the Kaimiloa needs to be verified by the ultimate tool of exploration and discovery, the human eye. Today, the subs return to the tumulus as Franck directs the painstaking job of excavating the wreck. 18th century ships were among the era's most advanced technological achievements. To learn more about its construction, the remaining section of the Royal Captain's deck is tagged and plotted. Along with information from historical sources, the measurements will aid in reconstructing an exact blueprint of the ship's architecture. Illuminated by the sub's lights, it seems almost possible to reach out and snatch a piece of history. The crews rely on the specially adapted remote arms to recover the fragile artifacts. A gentle stream of water pressure dusts the layers of sediment. Then, the pressure is reversed. Piece by piece, they recover cups, bowls, plates, vases, porcelain objects of every size and description. After 8 hours mining the site, it's time for the subs to return. At the surface, the Zodiacs stand by the buoy marker as the recovery team prepares to rendezvous with the subs. Chief Marius Orsi directs the operation from the Ocean Voyager. As the first sub reaches the 30-meter mark, the divers move in. Taking a moment to admire the artifacts, they place the pieces in separate bags. The bags are transferred to the Zodiacs. At the end of a long day, a diver hitches a ride back to the ship.
This is a nice mug.
On a sultry night, Frank, the divers, and the representatives of the National Museum of the Philippines gather on the aft deck to inspect the artifacts. As they admire the condition of an 18th century teapot, someone comes up with a surprise. The top still fits perfectly. Frank, too, has discovered something interesting.
This type of porcelain was not for the European market. First, because it has a mark, and second, the shape is for the Chinese Asiatic market, and the decor also is absolutely not for Europe. It's a symbolic decor with a dragon. You can see the tail of the dragon here, a flame, because the dragon was pouring flame, and the dragon goes across a cloud here, across the cloud that you can find here, and here is a dragon with the head here.
As the recovery operation winds down for the evening, the work aboard the Ocean Voyager is just beginning. Too deep to anchor, and too close to the reef to simply drift, the ship begins a 10-kilometer jog around the shoal. It will circle for the next 10 hours. The rest of the Royal Captain will have to wait one more day. Dawn finds the Ocean Voyager back in position near the reef. At the morning briefing, Frank looks tired. The long hours spent in the subs have taken a toll on everyone. It shows on their faces.
Et ça avec une taille comme ça,
Il faudrait faire des plongées plus courtes, peut-être, hein, pour que ce sous-marin puisse être affecté à la fouille du plus tôt.
Frank maps out the objectives for today's dive.
Général. Alors, il y en a ici. Donc, dans le matériel, tu verras, il y a une belle poulie ici, hein, pour essayer de relever.
de sortir la poulie, quoi.
Elle est libre, hein, aucun problème pour arriver. C'est possible. Que ce soit 2h30 maximum la plongée.
It seems as if an enormous chest of china has been emptied on the sea floor. The subs spend hour upon hour harvesting the vast field of porcelain. To minimize their number of round trips, the subs deposit the artifacts in a specially constructed lift basket. The air-powered express elevator rises along a guide cable toward the surface. In an explosion of bubbles, it reaches the top floor. The divers arrive and begin to sort the artifacts. The pulley is there along with dozens of other pieces. A 200-year-old wine bottle with its cork still intact. A souvenir of the 3 drunken sailors who perished with the ship. Franck helps unload tonight's catch on the aft deck. Divers Jean-Claude Roubaud and Philippe Rousseau are amazed to find the wooden pulley still works. Larry Alba from the National Museum records each item and assigns it a control number. His notes will be entered into a database that details the thousands of recovered pieces. Apart from their scientific value, the artifacts provide a unique glimpse into the customs of the 18th century English merchants. Now the subs are returned to the garage as the operations wind down for the night. If India was the jewel in the British crown, the China trade provided it with a silver setting. Voyages to the Far East were lengthy and uncertain. So in addition to their wages, the company allowed a captain and his officers 5% of a ship's tonnage for their own profit. The arrangement was called private trade. Coupled with a high level of corruption and greed, this side deal could make an enterprising man rich. A man like Captain Edward Barrow. Modern archaeologists refer to these exquisite ceramic pieces as white gold.
Yeah, we have here some representative porcelain from Royal Capitain's site. We have here a selection of small figurines. And on this very big and important, it was used to refresh the bottle. And it's very important for us because we can see here it has been mostly erased, but you can still see that it was painted on enamel, a coat of arms. And this means that all those porcelain here are part of a private trade. They were not the usual export porcelain for the East Indian Company. The East Indian Company wanted items of a medium range quality which could be sold at a rather low price. Those artifacts are of an extremely nice quality and were extremely expensive and were probably part of the private trade of Captain Barrow or some officers.
It's almost a month since the Ocean Voyager arrived in the South China Sea. After hundreds of hours of dives to the wreck, the expedition's time at the site is growing short. The subs have recovered thousands of artifacts. Yet there is one intriguing piece that remains tantalizingly out of reach.
We found that the bell of the Royal Captain fell 52 meters down from the tumulus at 352 meters deep.
The ship's bell. Its ringing would have sounded the alarm as the Royal Captain first struck the shoal. Franck ponders a way to raise the ship's bell, and symbolically, the Royal Captain itself. It's a task that presents some formidable problems. At a depth of 1,200 feet, the bell lies on a severe slope. No one knows exactly how much it weighs. Will the subs be able to lift it? After several centuries submerged, the iron bell may be. Its preservation must be paramount. After much debate, they hatch a unique plan. The job will require both subs operating in tandem. Using the remote arm, they will attempt to capture the bell with a makeshift net. The crew improvises to come up with a workable design. All in all, it seems a simple plan. But as in all things, the devil is in the details. Jean-Louis Caudat joins Franck on the bridge as they monitor the sub's descent. Shoals, Jean-Pierre Scotto pilots the sub as Jean-Claude radios their progress to the surface.
Ok, merci, on te reçoit parfaitement. C'est parfait, hein, c'est parfait. And we have a very good positioning, exactly on the bell.
After a 20-minute plunge, the bell appears on cue. Jean-Claude is literally on the edge of his seat.
Jury is not seeing very well because of the rock, so she has to go around.
The subs must maneuver carefully as they operate in close quarters. Perched on the rocky slope, the bell sits at a precarious 45-degree angle. Inching forward, Jules approaches from below. Then, a piece of bad luck. The net slips away.
Bien reçu, tu coupes les communications 5 minutes. On va mettre du temps, on récupère.
After a bit of maneuvering, they manage to pick it up. On the surface, Franck has another worry.
We have a storm coming, which is not very good for us here. This is a crucial point now.
The sub moves in again.
Now they are positioning themselves to try to capsize the bell into the net. The bell has moved a little bit. I hope it will not move more.
They deftly nudge the bell into the net.
They are moving.
Then give it a final push.
Elle commence à se retourner.
The men watch helplessly as a disaster unfolds.
Hop.
Up. What is the result of up? We don't know.
Franck waits, unaware of what has happened. As they pause to assess the damage, the men conspire to keep the mishap a secret. Muriel joins them on the bridge. Now the full extent of the situation is revealed. In a cloud of sediment, the bell tumbles down the slope. It stops on the edge of a chasm that plunges more than 1,000 meters.
The bell slides 2 meters down, but it's still in the net and head down, which is good.
Now, Jules attempts to hook the bell with its other arm.
You know, the bell has been here since 227 years, maybe. It doesn't want to leave the site. So there's some resistance.
Jim reaches in and strips the tangled net from the bell.
Okay, there is no net anymore. No ball, no net, no weight. There is only the bell. With the arm is holding the bell like this. It looks simple to put a net on a bell. No, it's not that simple.
As the subs near the surface, the divers take over. The bell is winched aboard the Ocean Voyager and placed on the aft deck. The whole ship turns out to see the bell. Yet even now, there is still a final twist in the story of the Royal Captain.
C'est York. C'est le nom d'un autre bateau. C'est la coche d'un autre bateau. York, the York, 1760. There is something very interesting, is that it's written the York, 1760.
The thrill of recovering the bell is tempered now by the questions raised by its inscription. What was the York? And how did this bell come to be found among the wreckage of the Royal Captain? For the moment, the answers must wait. Franck congratulates his men.
Bravo, hein? Bravo.
Nine months later, Franck Goddio has finally solved the mystery of the ship's bell. On a brisk December morning, he comes to St. Matthias Poplar Chapel in London's East End. Dedicated in 1621, the church and its graveyard are among the few surviving landmarks to the East India Company today. Rising like ship's masts, 8 wooden columns support the barrel-vaulted roof. Inscribed in the stone floor are memorials to the captains and seamen who lived and died in the company's service.
We now know how the York's bell came to be found on the wreck of the Royal Captain. Just after she was launched from dry dock, the Royal Captain was tied up alongside another boat that was being retired from service to the company. This was the York. Both ships, the York and the Royal Captain, were owned by the same man, Sir Richard Hotham. In order to save time and money outfitting his new boat, Sir Richard transferred equipment from the York to the Royal Captain. The Bell was a very expensive piece of equipment and would have certainly been reused on his new ship. After she was stripped of everything, the York survived for many years as a prison barge on the Thames River. The Royal Captain set sail for China soon after. As fate would have it, she foundered on the shoal just 1 year after she took to sea with the York's Bell.
Years after he embarked on his personal odyssey, Franck Goddio has finally achieved his goal. But finding the Royal Captain and retrieving its artifacts is not the end of the story. It is merely the prelude. For years to come, other archaeologists and researchers will continue to make new discoveries from the treasures Franck Goddio has recovered. On September 21st, 1774, a court of inquiry ruled that Captain Barrow and his crew had done everything humanly possible to save the Royal Captain. No fault was found with their actions. Though exonerated, it would be 5 years before Barrow would command another ship. In 1778, he was commissioned master of the 903-ton East Indiaman Royal Admiral. It was the last ship he would ever take to sea. According to a terse entry in the log, on Sunday, April 12th, Captain Edward Barrow departed this life at 2 a.m. He was buried at sea. For the company that had employed him, the end took slightly longer. But the loss of the Royal Captain was the beginning of a succession of withering failures for English merchants. In 1858, the British Crown revoked the company's charter and assumed control of its interests. The company faded into history. The final lines written by James Quick before the Royal Captain was abandoned provide a poignant epitaph for the once powerful and illustrious Honorable East India Company.
Leaving the unfortunate Royal Captain, as fine a merchantman as ever went to sea, to the grief and heartache of almost every individual, and particularly myself, as the whole of my fortune was in her.